If we want to look at a little bit more detail in the energy flow that comes in to the U.S., this is now just focusing on the U.S., and this is where all the energy comes from. It may be a little hard to read from the back of the room. And this is where it all goes to. And it all kind of aggregates together to a supply, and this is a certain unit, what are called quads, and it's convenient because the U.S. supply is about 100 of these quads. And then we use about a little less than that. We export a little bit. But about 70% of that comes from domestic sources, 30% from imports. And of that, about 83% are fossil fuels, and that's similar to what we saw in that worldwide chart before, 9% nuclear. So there's a lot of input and output, and it gets utilized in ways. Residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation are the four major energy, which are all roughly equal in amount. Not quite, but now if we look at this in a little bit more detail, and this diagram is very difficult to understand at first glance, but it's really a somewhat similar diagram to the one we had before, but it allows you to track the source of a particular, in this case, electricity, and the different things that go to make up the electricity, and then how that electricity gets used, how it gets used residential, commercial, and industrial. Essentially, at this point, very little electricity gets used for transportation. Of course, if electric cars come on, probably there'll be that'll appear in that diagram. And so this allows you to kind of get a little bit more detail on how these things work and where all the energy comes and goes. Today we're going to focus on solar energy, and the sun is, of course, a source of energy, and this now is in a slightly different unit, 141 watts per square meter of solar energy coming in, and of which about half or so of that actually is absorbed at the surface for solar energy. And then a lot of that, most of that energy re-hits from the Earth, either directly or is converted into heat and then is lost through long wavelength radiation. Some of that is captured by the atmosphere, and that gives rise to the so-called greenhouse effect that causes the Earth to trap a lot of energy, and that is one of the things that carbon dioxide has been implicated. Again, is a bit of a busy picture, but it shows carbon cycle and all the inputs and outgoes of the carbon cycle, all the photosynthesis that goes on both in the oceans and on land. And the important point here is that there's an extra, largely because of this large amount that we're putting out, the oceans and photosynthesis biomass is not able to utilize all of that, and there's an annual increase. That's showing up in the atmosphere. I'm sure you've probably all seen this being a ceiling curve, which tracks the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere in parts per million. It's now about 390,000 ppm. And these annual variations are because of the action of photosynthesis draws down the carbon dioxide during summer, and then it's winter, but more is released than is taken up, and so that's why there's this increase in atmosphere. So this is just a little bit of an overview of some issues of global energy, and as I'm sure you all know, not just from this talk, but from other talks you may have heard, that there's a lot of issues to worry about, how we are able to satisfy our energy demands while at the same time preserving our environment. And so to address this issue, the Department of Energy about 10 years ago convened a series of workshops, and these are just the covers of the reports that were generated at these workshops. Very high-level scientific workshops that included a lot of people who worked very hard to try to identify some of the scientific issues, places where there were gaps in the knowledge, places where more research needed to be done, and so on. And so this collection of reports was then acted on by the Department of Energy, and a series of 46 Energy Frontier Research Centers set up around the U.S. It happened in 2009, and fortunate enough to have one of the EFRCs, as they're called, Energy Frontier Research Center, located here at WashU, centered here at WashU, although it has partners around the world, really. And that's what I'll be telling you about as we go on. So there's been a lot of work that started within the last few years. It's built on research that had been done for many years, but there's now a very concentrated profile or portfolio of research that's addressing energy-related areas. They aren't all, in fact, most of them are not solar related, but all different areas of energy. Now, the center we have here at WashU is called the Photosynthetic Antenna Research Center, or we call it PARC, and aims to understand the basic scientific principles that govern solar energy collection by photosynthetic organisms, plans to use its knowledge to enhance natural antenna, fabricate biohybrid and bioinspired harvesting. So this is kind of our mission, to try to understand how plants and photosynthetic organisms collect light and transfer it to the systems that do the energy storage. So we're really looking at the very first part of the photosynthetic process. So let's look a little bit at photosynthesis. I won't go into too much detail on this, just give some kind of general ideas about it. So it's the conversion of light energy into chemical energy, and I always like to show this very nice picture, which is a nice metaphor for the process of photosynthesis. Some mechanical device or some machine that takes the energy from the sun and converts it. Of course, photosynthesis is the source of all of our food and most of our energy resources. It's a very important process. We have been studying here at WashU for a long time and trying to understand really the deepest aspects of it at the practical level. The photosynthesis, of course, is a global process, and this is a NASA satellite image that shows the areas on land that are green, that have the most photosynthesis going on, and also in the oceans. Color coding between the ocean and the terrestrial photosynthesis. About half of total photosynthesis goes on land, and the other half takes place. A lot of the oceanic photosynthesis in polar regions, particularly productive. So how does this process work? Light needs to be absorbed. It's a solar energy or light capture process. And so what happens is the light is absorbed by a pigment, and that's represented by these green circles here. And these are chlorophyll type pigments or other pigments. And then there's what we call an energy transfer process that delivers this energy to a complex called a reaction center, which does the chemical transformation of the light by transferring an electron from a donor to an acceptor. Basic, what's called the primary process. Light absorption, energy transfer, we call this whole complex the antenna, and we'll see the actual molecular structures of this. And the energy is used by the reaction center to drive electron. You can think of it sort of like a big satellite dish where the antenna represents the dish and collects the energy and focuses it. All different photosynthetic organisms contain this light gathering antenna system. We'll see a little later that in some cases they may have overshot and have too big an antenna. Efficient work, efficient functioning. Some of the work at PARC is involved with actually trying to cut back the size of this antenna. But it's there, and all organisms obviously serves a function, and we want to try to understand this in as way as we can. This process takes place on molecular structures, and these show structures, and then these are light absorption spectra of various antenna complexes, and these are found in different sorts of organisms. This one here has absorption in the blue, sort of the blue-green region. It is found in algae that live down well underneath the surface of the ocean. So this color of light penetrates that deeply. These are found in types of bacteria that which their light actually drive significantly longer wavelengths. Ones that are perhaps most familiar that are involved in plant photosynthesis are shown here at the bottom, and those are complexes that contain a lot of pigments. They also contain proteins and together to do this process. So a little bit more about PARC. This is a logo that has the PARC logo, which is designed sort of to look like this the setting sun, and got three different themes within PARC. One is natural antennas, one is called Biohybrid antennas, one is bio-inspired antennas, and I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those as we go along. And we have various sort of signature projects that we're working on, trying to elucidate structure and function of natural antennas, improving solar coverage. I'll tell you a little bit about these as we go along. Optimizing antenna size and architecture, developing antenna fabrication tools, and an important part and sort of the foundation that we see this is that we're enriching education and outreach, and also building intellectual and technical capacity, sort of capital infrastructure. And all of this is designed as harvesting solar energy for the future. So, how is PARC organized? As I said, we're here at WashU, and we have 17 principal investigators from 10 different institutions. All these off, but they're 3 national labs, several universities, US, and 2. So this is quite a wide-ranging group of scientists who come together to be part of PARC. There are 5 different PIs that are here, based here at WashU. Myself and Dr. Pakrasi, who's here, Lee Holton, Kim Biswas, and Cynthia Lowe from the last 2 from. We have both liberal arts and sciences, and in addition to the principal investigators, we have a whole collection of research affiliates, really from around the world. And these are people who have a significant part. Oftentimes will come and do some work to either here, or one of our students will go to one of these affiliate labs, experience, and so on. So there's quite a range of different groups and scientific expertise involved in the park. One of the things that we're most proud of at PARC are our outreach activities, and there's some snapshots of some of the outreach activities, and I think that this session really qualifies as one of our sort of new directions in outreach. We coordinate a wide range of outreach activities at the K-12 and undergraduate, and also at the educator level. This is mainly designed high school teachers. And Rachel Rugarello is our outreach coordinator, and if you're interested in more outreach things, talk with her. She's and we'll be around afterwards. These are some of the outreach activities. These are some of the, we've reached many hundreds of K-12 students, and we're interested in expanding this in undergraduate, and we've also done some. This is one of the things that we're most proud of, is our outreach activities. So I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about the three different scientific themes: natural antennas, biohybrid antennas, and bio-inspired antennas. And we start from the completely natural, in other words, what Mother Nature gave us, go through what we call biohybrid. So this is sort of half natural, half synthetic. And then we end with the bio-inspired, so these are now completely synthetic. Logical progression. The idea being that these artificial systems might be at some point utilized in synthetic, artificial photosynthetic devices, whereas the natural antennas give us sort of the workings of the system, how Mother Nature has made it work, and also might allow us to improve photosynthesis, the efficiency of it in systems that would then be used, say, for algal or biological bioenergy storage. So theme one, and this is just one example, and I took this from my own work, looking at the architecture and energy transfer pathway in the photosynthetic membrane system. And so what we have done is use the whole combination of different tools: mass spectrometry, X-ray crystallography, optical spectroscopy, biochemistry, and we've used this to really try to understand the structure and functional properties of this antenna system found in a certain type of bacteria. And these are organisms that live in very, very low and low light environments, and so they have sort of a giant antenna, like a huge satellite dish, and are able to live under very, very low light intensity. And this is just a figure from a recent paper that we had in which we used mass spectrometry to determine the pigment composition of this complex. And so this is one of our ongoing projects that really is designed to try to understand the very inner workings of a natural antenna complex. Here's another project in which we're looking to expand the solar spectrum. So the light that photosynthetic organism utilizes, an oxygen evolving plant or bacterium, alga, basically covers the same range that our eyes see. And anything beyond that is just lost, it's wasted. So the solar spectrum, if you look at, especially if you look at it in terms of what's called the photon flux spectrum, so the number of photons per second per meter squared, is this red curve. And if you could expand that solar spectrum even a little bit, and in this case we've 50 nanometers, you could significantly increase the amount of energy that is available to be utilized. And in this case, because this extra 50 nanometers of absorption comes right at the peak of this solar spectrum, it increases the photon flux by 19%. Surprisingly high. And turns out there are some organisms that have figured out how to utilize this 700 to 700 cyanobacteria that live in the reef. Somebody has to go there and collect these things. Have to do it. So we have actually done that. We have the organisms, and we're in the process of working on trying to understand how they manage to catch this extra 50 nanometers of light. They make a unique pigment that's not made by normal plants. And so we're in the process of trying to. That's one of our other projects. Another thing involves the light saturation curve. Now we all know that when the sun comes up, it starts off rather low intensity, and about noon it reaches its maximum, and then as the day goes on, the intensity of light drops off. So that's the daily PAR. PAR stands for photosynthetic reactive radiation. So this is a curve that is found essentially the same curve everywhere in the world. But what happens is that if you look at the rate of photosynthesis, function of the intensity, they sit at 12 o'clock, you'll be up at this very high intensity of light, and what you'll find is that the rate of photosynthesis will saturate. So you start off at low intensity here, and a little more or less linear with intensity. Then fairly quickly it'll bend over, and this here represents a sort of a maximum rate. And so all of this light in this region, or from basically 8 a.m. till about 5 p.m., most of it is actually wasted. That's shown in this yellow region called excess light. So the organism is collecting more light than it really is able to utilize efficiently. It has some very sophisticated mechanisms for dissipating that. That obviously doesn't lead to productive energy storage. So one of the ways to try to resolve this problem is to decrease the size of the antenna. So since you've got too many pigments that are collecting light that are funneling them into the reaction center, and so by cutting down the size of the antenna in any individual cell, you will allow some of the light to penetrate deeper into the, in this case this is an algal suspension, but the same concept applies for a terrestrial plant. You won't absorb all of it in the very top layer. It'll penetrate more deeply because it doesn't have as much pigment in it, and therefore you'll have less of this waste, which is called non-photochemical, and more productivity. So that's the concept, and this idea has been around for a number of years. We're now working various means to try to decrease the size of the antenna. We have two different projects going on here. I'll just mention one that's being done by Dick Sayre, who's one of our partners. And what they've done is take algae with different antenna sizes, and the way they've done that is they've manipulated the amount of chlorophyll B, technical detail, and they're able to monitor this using fluorescence, and claim that they have made is that this significantly increases the efficiency of the algae that have. I also have another project that Dr. Pakrasi is doing with cyanobacteria, and I didn't include that because I think it's off next week, probably discussed that to some extent. And there the story is a little bit different. So it appears as though this question of the antenna size may depend on the type of organism you're looking at, and it may not be quite as simplistic as I made before. So there's two different approaches to this that are being carried out through PARC. Here's one of our Theme 2 projects. On the Biohybrid antenna complexes. And this is being done, our group in collaboration with Dr. Biswas and EEC. Here the idea is, you see these kind of fingers here. This is titanium dioxide, which is a semiconductor or material, and is coated with these fluorosome antennas that were there in the that I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. The idea there is that the light energy is collected by this antenna, transferred down, and then there is a electrical current that is generated sort of like a solar cell, and that generates electricity schematically here. So we have the biohybrid aspect of this is the bio part, natural complex that we isolate from an organism, and then this is the organic part, the complex that actually works. The efficiency is not very high, but the concept is there. This is another biohybrid system that is done by one of our PARC guys, Neil Hunter from Sheffield in the UK. And this uses techniques of lithography, like these electronic circuits, and you can put down the antenna complexes along with a certain pattern, and you can see the patterns here. And they're able to then look at energy transfer. In this case, I have a line of this complex, and I can watch the energy move all the way along. And the idea is to create arrays that exhibit controlled directional energy creation, so this will be hiding the energy. We now go to Theme 3. These are the completely bio-inspired systems, all synthetic. And what we've got here are a number of designer pigments, and so organic chemists build these complex pigments, and they can control the absorption properties of these and regulate exactly where these things absorb. And then we have proteins that are designed specifically from scratch and attach the pigments to that and create these synthetic systems that will also do antenna function. One more example of sorts of complexes. And this work is being led by Dewey Holton here at WashU, but involves people from Penn State and other. I thought I'd just end by asking the audience which you think is more efficient at solar energy conversion, photovoltaic array or plant. For those of you who think the photovoltaic array is more efficient, raise your hand. Those of you who think the plant is more efficient, about even. Actually, most audiences, it's usually about 80-20 in favor of the plant. Yeah. But it turns out that if you're looking just at the incident energy coming from the sun and how much of it is converted into a form that can be utilized, one of the problems with this kind of comparison is that plants produce fuels. Basically, a piece of corn produces sugars. A piece of photovoltaics, it produces electricity. That's a little bit of an apples to oranges We had to do a little bit of work to try to make that comparison a little bit more head-to-head. But in reality, the photovoltaic array is significantly more efficient. Once it's built, it will be about 3 times as efficient as a plant. And the other thing in favor of the photovoltaics is that they will work, they don't have the issue of the light saturation with the showed where the antenna was too big. And they also will work 12 months a year, whereas you typically will have a growing season. So there's a lot of issues there, and obviously one doesn't choose only to go with the thing that is the most efficient by some certain amount. There are a lot of other factors that you have to consider. This is one of the reasons why photovoltaic cells are more efficient, and that is that they utilize a significantly larger amount of the solar spectrum. This is now transmission. So a plant will basically use this light from 400 to 700, as I mentioned before. Once you get to 700, it quits absorbing, and so it transmits. Remember I said we were trying to shift this curve out a little bit further with that new type of organism. But a photovoltaic cell, a silicon solar cell, all the way out to about 1,000. So it collects a larger fraction of its output. That's one of the major reasons why photovoltaics are efficient. But you can kind of think about this in terms of pros and cons. In photosynthetic system, it produces a fuel naturally or with minimal processing, self-assembling and self-repairing. I mean, we say, well, it's less efficient, but built into that lower efficiency number is the fact that it started from a seed and it's assembled itself, where that obviously didn't happen in the photovoltaic. So that number is perhaps a little deceiving. The potential to reduce the carbon dioxide levels, so this is an important issue, of course, if you can have all these algal ponds that are coupled to a power plant and using some of the flue gas from the power plant, you can make a significant dent in carbon dioxide, although it takes a lot of area to do that. Low capital investment if you don't count the land. The land that you have to utilize is an investment, but of course that's true for the photovoltaics. They have this lower intrinsic conversion efficiency. They use the narrow range of the solar spectrum, which is one of the reasons the efficiency is low. Have the light saturation, and I didn't talk about it, but there's also oxygen inhibition effects, limited growing season. In some cases, they use a lot of water, so in some environments, it may not be that water use. The photovoltaics have a wide range solar spectrum, don't have the light saturation effects, has this high efficiency and viability and water use once they're made. But this doesn't produce a fuel, it produces electricity, and for a lot of purposes of transportation, you need a fuel. You can't fly an airplane on fuel. This doesn't have any direct impact on carbon dioxide levels. It has a very high initial cost. This is the main barrier to solar photovoltaic installations at the moment, is this very high capital cost, and it also may use toxic material. Other things you have to think about are the cost of land and capital, water use, operation, maintenance, waste disposal, transmission, and storage of the fuel, risks from manufacturing interactions with the food supply. There was a nice article in the New York Times a couple months ago. Climate change. So there are a lot of sort of back and forth things that you have to think about, and no single one-size-fits-all solution. And just to end, I don't see this very well, but it may be that the photovoltaic is more efficient, but in this case the plant is like it's been out Somebody sent me this picture. It doesn't show up quite as well as I'd like here, but it. So, be happy to answer any questions that you might. Yeah.
Do you need to with your outreach program? Yes. I'm going to talk about that right after Bob. Talk about some opportunities that.
Yeah, we have a lot of different opportunities involving, some of it involving SURF, some are undergraduate research fellowships, involving K-12 outreach. Rich is going to tell you all about it. That's some great programs.
Looking at on the ocean, large ocean sector, you find that in the large. And it seems like there's this other idea we have. There are two large saturated. So there's sort of like a find the best one.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You have photosynthetic organisms that inhabit all different environments, and you sort of described a couple of them. And obviously, if you've got a corn plant that's out on the surface, it's basically getting the full sun all day long. If you've got something that's down in the water, and those organisms that have the giant antennas there, they typically are down in the mud at the bottom of a lake, someplace where they get very, very low intensity. Calculate that each chlorophyll molecule absorbs a photon once every 8 hours. So there's really not getting much light down there. But they're able to survive and grow and produce and so on this low amount of energy because they have this big antenna. Now they're not in a situation where they're getting saturated, where they're getting too much light. They're in a different environment where they're basically scrounging for every possible bit of light that they can get. So you have all these different solutions that Mother Nature has devised for the light capture antenna processes. And those are just a couple of solutions. And I showed that one slide with all the different complexes on it. Those are what you find in different kinds of organisms. Now, why some organisms have, in a sense, too much antenna, why they saturate at such low light intensities, is a question that nobody quite knows the answer to yet. Various ideas about how, well, it's better for you to absorb the light and waste it than it is for you to let your neighbor absorb it and outgrow you and die. So you're better off to, in a sense, be greedy. I'm talking about the plant. And so on. And some of those are evolutionary questions in terms of how the organisms may have evolved and so on, that we don't really quite understand all the fine details of. But it's also the case that evolution didn't take place to maximize the bioenergy production for us to use it. Evolution maximizes reproductive fitness. And so what might be the most efficient thing in terms of that process might not be the most efficient in terms of energy collection and conversion. And so we can go in and using modern techniques of what's called synthetic biology, we can tweak the system, cut down the size of the antenna, expand the solar spectrum, the range that it uses. You might think that those two things fight each other, but they're actually two entirely separate processes that don't interfere with each other. And so we can make all these changes in the system that are designed to try to improve the efficiency and develop higher energy production in various systems. And so that's one of the things that PARC is doing and a lot of other people are doing. Madhuri?
Just a comment. Get into this business of renewable versus non-renewable. You have an easy way to go to that one of the first slides, the question that comes up often in different kind of discussions. Somebody at some conference when somebody actually asked the same.
Which question, which slide do you want
It's
now?
the one that you have shown different, yeah. This one. The question is, how many of those are products of photosynthesis?
Well, all of these are products of photosynthesis ultimately. And of course, the renewable energy, a lot of it is.
Hydroelectric and nuclear.
Hydroelectric and nuclear, I don't think you can describe to photosynthesis. Certainly any fossil fuel is basically the product of ancient photosynthesis stored away. So, yeah, photosynthesis
That's why
has given us all these fuels.
storage of energy becomes done well. This process is done by us.
In fact,
Long-term solutions. Stored energy.
for stored energy. Now, by releasing all of that carbon, that it's trapped in the form of carbon compounds, by releasing that, we may cause problems to ourselves, and this is what I'm worried about. Yeah. Speak up a little bit now.
I have a question. I have system happy with
Oh, the Biohybrid system, yeah. Yeah.
curious about here. According to your opinion, what's limited for
The weak point in this system comes right here. We have a dye that is functioning as an artificial reaction center. And the idea is the energy is transferred into that dye. It then undergoes electron transfer process and puts that electron into the TiO2. And it completes the circuit and ultimately goes around. The problem with it is that the dye doesn't match the properties of the antenna very well. So there's kind of a mismatch between these. And this is where I think a lot of the loss of efficiency occurs. So one of the things we're trying to do now is to either put a natural reaction center here or to find an artificial system that's a better match in terms of the energy levels of that point.
So the more interesting is, I guess that person how the load one choice. So how can you find the most of it?
Well, I think at this stage we're still in the process of just trying to make the thing work in a not as controlled a way as perhaps you're envisioning, where we would have the dye that would be. Later time, one might be able to put specific attachment sites that would orient things on there in a particular way, have that be a favorable orientation. We're not to that stage yet. When I showed you that picture with all the different ones on it, well, that involves
mostly what we call preparative biochemistry, where we grow the organisms, and of course the plants you can grow in a greenhouse or whatever, the algae or the bacteria where most of those complexes come from. We grow in the laboratory in big bottles or bioreactors with light bulbs that sometimes LEDs. So we have have a picture of it that I showed, but we have a whole collection of different devices. There's now over in Paul, is it that the Urbauer, there's a 500 liter photobioreactor that's installed in Urbauer Hall. That's part of the engineering college, and we have smaller units. So we grow these organisms. That's sort of the first step, to get a culture of the organism, grow a bunch of cells. Then we take those cells and we disrupt them, we break them open, treat them with basically detergents or other chemicals to release some of the, sort of tease them apart. Then we use techniques like centrifugation or chromatography to separate out these complexes. And we have various ways of knowing exactly whether it's pure. We can do gels or SDS page gels or spectrometry or various other things to try to determine that. And then we try to determine their structure using techniques like X-ray crystallography. That's what gave all those beautiful structures. So there's a whole range of different things. It all starts with growing the organisms and then going through a whole series of steps of purifying particular complex that we might be interested in. Oh, in this particular one. Well, in this case, the chlorosomes are actually pretty easy to isolate because they're not very tightly attached on the membrane in the cell. So we break open the cells and then we can just do a salt treatment of various sorts that will cause the chlorosomes to float off the membranes, and then we can do we usually collect the chlorosomes. The chlorosomes are actually pretty easy. Some of the other complexes are a lot trickier in terms of biochemistry. But that's something that my group and Hamadri's group have done for years and years, work on purifying these complexes using techniques of biochemistry.
We're speaking of photosynthetic arrays. I don't understand why it's important to look at the level of if those photons that have a low
the Planck laws, which I think you're referring to, the inverse relationship between the energy and the wavelength. So the longer wavelength photons have lower energy. Shorter wavelength photons have higher energy. The thing is, you get a certain distribution of photon energy that comes out of the sun. And that's sort of skewed out into the near-infrared region. So there's a lot of that light that we can't see with our eyes, but the plant doesn't see either. That's longer wavelength and is wasted. So the idea in that project of expanding the solar spectrum is to just go a little ways into that region of the spectrum. And there's data that shows that light can still be effective. If you go too far into the infrared, the energy of each photon is too low, and you just can't do photochemistry with it. So it poops out at some point. We used to think it pooped out at around 700 nanometers, but now we know for sure it goes at least to 750. Well, there's not many photons in the UV. The energy is high, but there's another factor that's involved, and that is that the threshold energy, which is the energy that you store is the energy at the sort of long wavelength end of the process. So if you have a UV photon, it may absorb that, but then you lose most of that energy as heat, and you only store the same energy as you red photon. So that's true in a photovoltaic cell too, that threshold energy effect. Throw away the energy difference between a high energy photon and threshold energy. That's what you were going to say?
Blue, immediate being a project, but the way the whole system works, it is.
Yeah, and that energy is just lost as heat. There doesn't seem to be any feasible way to recover that energy. Maybe we should turn it over to Natalie and Rachel at this point. So, oh, do you want to let people get pizza? Is pizza here?
Guys, are you hungry? Would you like to?
Okay. All right. So take 5 minutes to get some pizza if you're still interested in outreach. It's not going to be long. Just information session if you're opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you.
I'm the young from physics department.
Oh, okay.
I see you I care meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very interested actually. I do electronic structure technology.
Okay, so you were asking a more sophisticated question than I was probably asking. We can talk more sometime if you're interested. I'd be happy to meet with you.
Find the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you have my email address. It's just my name, my last name at wustel.edu.
Yeah.
Okay. So well, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
High school.
I would think it would be. Sounds good. I was afraid to let Edward go up and back.
I know. I worry about that.
I know, me
That's a
too.
real word.
I'm like,
Let's see what happens.
Dan, can I use your dongle thing?
Got
Yeah.
my charger. Can you?
However you want. Those are all true.
Okay.
Yeah. All graduate chemistry education, which most people don't know it's really.
Okay.
I teach people science education. None of those things are really that important. So I can just give some information about it. I might just say something when I introduce.
Okay. So another not able to get this. It's hard for me to tell you because
So Natalie, do you want me to just remind people? I
You know what, maybe I can say that.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll just say that.
start.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
And then-
my.
Yeah, let's just do this first.
This is this, and then this.
So actually, you did decide.
Oh, okay, that's you. That'll be your cue to start.
Yeah, I can see on full screen. It's like, okay. And so you have a choice.
Yeah, I heard that part of the same.
Here's what it is. So here's, yeah, so there's full screen. Stays the front edge of the door connected. This side is the front edge of the door. Oh, that's fine. So, full screen. Yeah. Actually, it's not bad.
That could be that you have like these crazy.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Can you need to go into Adobe Connect?
Oh, you wanted to record.
Well, still recording right now. People are listening to me talk right now.
Oh, hello, everyone.
That is on.
Are there people on right now?
So you can.
All right. There's a lot of people here, everyone. You guys are not here. You guys are here. I don't-
Also full screen.
What mic do you want Rachel to use, Dan?
It doesn't really matter. This isn't even.
I can talk. Can I speak?
I don't even think this was picking up.
Oh, for us.
Yeah,
What about the hand?
you could do that if you want. This works fine. And then go ahead and yeah, that's how I'm getting it into Adobe
Will
Connect.
they be picking up?
I can
Yeah.
talk loudly.
And then if your computer screen.
Oh, hi. You too. Right. Well, probably more like a third. Could be lower. But the capital cost of producing this. We had a paper. Paper that came out in April.
Okay.
Well, sort of through the numbers.
Yeah.
Tell those who are already in it to make sure that.
And
Yes,
talk about
so you-
what our-
okay.
The numbers, what they are, how much.
Interested people.
Okay.
One more person.
That-
It's,
Oh, well, thank you. That,
What's that?
telling it's, story of 100.
Oh, you think?
It's not a very good reception.
Okay.
I have most people.
All right, so thank you for sticking around for us. And thank you for joining us for our first events and topics session with thank you, Bob, for giving that for us. We had several I noticed in the audience we had a couple PARC members, and there's Joey Springer. We also had a couple members of iCares here as well. Suzanne Louis is from iCares, and also the director of iCares, Dr. Himadri Prassi, was also here. And we had about 8 people online watching, so we're trying to incorporate live streaming with all of our seminars that we have this fall. And this is our lineup. We have 2 site visits, you'll see. One to the Midwest Biodiesel Products Fuel Plant, which is in Roxana, Illinois. We also have one to what Bob was, we can see the large bioreactor over in Urbauer, which is on October 18th. If you're interested in going on either of those tours, we do ask you to RSVP for those. You don't need to RSVP for the seminars, obviously. So again, thanks for joining us. And right now, I'd like to turn it over to PARC's Education and Outreach Coordinator, Rachel Riggerello. Rachel works part-time for PARC, our Department of Energy-funded Energy Frontier Research Center, and part-time for Science Outreach. And Rachel's background is very interesting. She has her undergraduate degree from Cornell in biology, graduate degree in chemistry education from University of Pennsylvania, and she's currently working on her PhD. And she's also a Teach for America alum. So we're very lucky to have Rachel, and we're also excited to share with you, if you're interested in joining PARC and iCares with either the certificate or just participating in outreach. Look forward to having you.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So this is just going to be an informal, I'm going to talk both about the certificate program that we just kind of rolled out in January of this year, and then also just general outreach programs that you can get involved in. So the certificate program is really about combining and complementing course learning. So it's made up of all of these different experiences to get outside of just regular classroom coursework and into the world where these things are happening in different ways. So that's why we have site visits incorporated in our energy series, because we want you to be able to see, for instance, if you were to do this research in a lab in engineering around bioenergy, what does that actually look like in a biodiesel facility where people are doing this? It includes academic coursework that we require that it's interdisciplinary so that you get a wide perspective. So it's not just about what energy looks like from your scientific discipline, but also looking at it within some of these other discipline clusters like social sciences or architecture. That's why you'll see on some of our events and topics seminars, we have sustainable design from somebody in architecture who talks about how they use biomimicry to really inform design that will be more efficient and also nature friendly, but also look at nature for inspiration. We also have hands-on research experiences. So Bob was talking about looking at the summer undergraduate research fellowships. So PARC does provide funding for students to do that. The applications come out for that usually. And so you're able to kind of submit a proposal and get funded for 10 weeks. Pretty nice stipend, and you can stay here for the summer and do research in one of the labs of our PARC PIs. Networking opportunities, so we'll have, for the people in our certificate, we'll have opportunities for pizza and informal meetings with professors, and then also some seminar events. I want to talk mostly about the outreach activities because that might be the most unique thing to this certificate program on campus, and also what I have the most expertise in. So this is just one upcoming outreach opportunity. I know that you asked, Robin asked about what is going on. So this is one example of something that's upcoming right now where they're looking for. So this is a Saturday Learning Lab program with Youth Exploring Science. It's hosted out of the St. Louis Science Center, which we collaborate with pretty extensively. And so what they're doing is that they're going to use some of the PARC curriculum that we've been developing over the last couple of years on bioenergy and solar energy. And they're working with high school students from St. Louis City who come on Saturdays for 3 hours, 2 sessions. So the first session might have about 20 students. The second session will have about 20 students. And so we're looking for volunteers who would like to attend these sessions, work with students, provide information about your college experience, your research experience, your coursework, whatever it is that the students need, and also just support them in their projects. So these projects are highly scientific and technical, hopefully, and so sometimes they just require more one-on-one attention than maybe the one science educator in the room can provide to 20 students at any given time, because it's a very project-based, hands-on experience where the kids are working on projects. So if you're interested in this, you can contact me. You can also go online and look at it for more information. You would earn 1 point for the if you're in the certificate program, you can earn 1 point for attending 2 sessions. So each session is one of those hour-and-a-half half sessions, and 2 points for attending one session every Saturday for a semester. And so we encourage multiple, the reason why we encourage multiple sessions, attendance in multiple sessions, is because oftentimes you develop a relationship with those students, and so if you can see them every single Saturday or every other Saturday even for an entire semester, it's really much more meaningful for them and for you because you develop a relationship with them and actually watch their project kind of move forward rather than just seeing it as a one-time drop-in. So that's one upcoming opportunity. Any questions about this? Yes. I think, does anyone remember the exact time? It's morning, probably like 9 to...
I think 9 to noon and then 1 to 4.
Okay. I can send you, if you're interested, email me and I can just send you like the exact information about where it is and the time frame and who to reach out to for more information.
And the times are also posted.
So that's one thing. And you have all of these kind of handouts. I didn't really direct you to them, but I guess about the certificate. Talked enough about it. Are there questions? Any interest forms and our program? Are there questions about?
How can I figure out which classes qualify for this thing?
The course, there's 3 course clusters, and on PARC that was letting you just switch to the website. We have them all listed online.
Okay.
And if you think that a course should fit and it's not listed, you should let us know because the courses change here every single year, and so we do want to update it, and we want to update it for other people in the certificate. So if you go to our outreach page and you go to the certificate of accomplishment, you can go to course clusters, and you should be able to kind of scroll down.
Printable one, or PDF.
Right, and if you want to download it and print it out. And if you see something that seems like it would be a good fit, but we don't have it, you should just. Yes. The paperwork is all online, so the certificate of accomplishment forms are here. So you would fill out a declaration of interest form, and this is for any coursework you do, independent studies, outreach activities, and then seminars and site visits. So you just kind of fill it in online, push submit, and we keep track of it for you, sort of, just to say, like, here is where you're at. And hopefully then, at least once a year, kind of meet with you and talk to you about your progress.
I'm just adding. Track that. Happy notes.
And this is also where the events and topics information is, and where you would RSVP for the site visits, and also where really all of the education and outreach information will be. What did you say?
On the upcoming outreach activity.
Where is it? Oh, right here. I'm like, okay, here's the upcoming outreach activities. Yes, 9 to 12, 1 to 4. So Matthew Stevens is the senior educator at the Science Center who's running this program. So he and I have collaborated around the curriculum, and then he'll be sort of the lead person there looking for volunteers. And it starts on September 21st and goes through December 17th. And if this semester isn't good for you, it continues next semester, starting in January to late April. So it actually ends up being all year round and summer program that the students participate in for 3 years total. They actually get paid for it, a minimum wage, and so it's really their job as well to show up, and it's also in order to kind of expose them and engage in science and get them interested in it. Some of the other things that will be coming up in terms of outreach, we do energy education courses for teachers, which Bob talked a little bit about. So we host workshops on Saturdays. So a lot of the outreach activities we'll do will be on. Sometimes at some schools after 3 at some schools, after 4 at some schools, 5, depending on which school you're talking about. But on Saturdays, we'll be hosting workshops, about 3 workshops a semester. They usually run from 8 to noon. So we're always looking for people to volunteer, like the Friday before, to help set up, come that Saturday to help facilitate on these questions and hands-on activities, and then just to stay afterwards. So we do those on wind energy, solar energy, and biomass. They require sort of a background for the teachers. Oftentimes we have a quick sort of 20-minute introduction from a faculty member at WashU, and then we would talk about how this relates to their curriculum, and then they would practice and sort of an activity that they could then do with their students. So we have kits of materials that the teachers can check out after they come to the workshops so that they can do them with their students as well. The real goal of this is to say, as a teacher, I might have been in the classroom already for 20 years. I don't necessarily know what the current research is at the university, and so I'm trying to take what they're teaching in terms of basic science content and connect it to authentic current research at the university level so that both their students understand that and see science in context rather than just as like a series of facts. So that's kind of the idea of those workshops. So we're always looking for people to help out with that. Yeah?
Sign up for one of those, should we just?
Yes, and I can, if you are on sort of like the list already, which you are since you're a part of the certificate, as they're coming up, I'll basically email out to everyone saying, here's an opportunity. So you should have gotten the one about the science, and that's why. So you'll definitely get the same thing for the workshops. And if you aren't in the certificate program and decide that that's not really for you, still want to do outreach, please sign up on the sheet that Suzanne sent around, because then you'll also get those emails. Okay? We have some dates set for those workshops, so I can send it out. Let me know if you want. Something else that we do is we have a partnership with a charter school in the city. So charter schools in St. Louis have to be sponsored by an institution. And so Washington University in St. Louis sponsors KIPP Inspire Academy, which is a KIPP school. KIPP is a national model of charter school knowledge is power program located in the city of St. Louis, South St. Louis in Fox Park. They have a number of projects going on there. So again, if you're interested in like a more long-term commitment, this would be something for you because they really require people to kind of commit to say, I'm going to stay here a semester, every other week for a semester. So some of the options for working here, they're doing a Science Olympiad kind of project this year where they're going to be having classes every other Saturday. They're doing they probably are on Tuesdays, some kind of like solar energy class/club where they're working sensitized from around 4 to 5 during their club time. And on Monday afternoons, they'll also be doing science club activities. So those are some options, but if you were to do that, it would be something where you would say, I want to do this every other week, probably. And if you want to do something like this, I would say just email me individually because it's not something where, it might not get blanketed out to everybody. But if it's something where you're interested in partnering with a specific school over time, this is another opportunity. And then there'll always be, like last year we had, an opportunity at a middle school for a week-long energy project where we were looking for volunteers to come out for the week, or a couple of days during the week and work with middle schoolers in their classroom. So these things will come up throughout the year and we'll just let you know about them. And if you can participate, that would be great. The last thing I will say is that we have just started a mini grant program. So this is really pretty exciting because as an undergraduate or a graduate student, you can apply for a mini grant up to $1,000. And so the idea with this is that, first of all, grant writing is a really how it's trying to do, and we have the form set up in that way. It's also important as you move forward. I know that some of you are thinking about research positions, and a lot of these research positions, when you write grants, require that you have an outreach component. Almost every single one now does. Things from NSF and HHMI, all of these places really require that. So it's a good experience to try to get that done now and see how it works. Because partnering with schools is not always easy, and you have to kind of work with them to benefit them as well as to help you meet your goals. And so we do have opportunity for you to bring your own ideas to the classroom and or the community. And so these are, you're able to do this as an individual or a team. You can apply for a grant for up to $1,000. You should discuss your ideas with me in advance. And the first deadline is actually October 15th. So it's in about a month from now. So if you have an idea or if this is something you want to do and you want to sit down and talk about it, tell me. If you want to wait, the next deadline will be in March 1st, and we'll do this kind of twice a year. So we'll put those out there, you'll apply, we'll review all the applications. And so basically, with your $1,000, you'll talk about what kinds of equipment you want to buy. Maybe it also covers the cost of copies, that kind of thing. And then we'll help to fund those. Anything else you want to add? And that's it. I don't have anything else to necessarily. A lot of the stuff is on the website. A lot of it is up and coming. I've kind of talked about all the stuff we have right now in terms of scheduled seminar series, the program and the requirements, and then also thinking about what outreach activities are already available. So some of them will come up again on our mailing. Part of those situations about that. Any questions about this, about the certificate, about seminar series, outreach?
I will also add quickly that the seminar this Thursday, we don't have on our list, but it's why do we need so that's just the actual title.
Rich Axelbaum will be the same professor who will lead the tour of the Did everybody have a chance to sign in if you want information about opportunities, or if you didn't? As long as we have your contact info, we'll be in touch with you as things move forward, and just check the website for more information at any time.